So joining me now is somebody who did a deep dive in investigation, not a journalist that you know by name per se, but it's a political science professor from Stanford University. And he went deep on a topic, frankly, that many of us journalists have been assuming wanting to do, but it's in some ways so resource heavy, so much of a time suck that it's always something you put off. And every once in a while you delve into it and you realize there's something that isn't right here. But you know, is this what I need to be focused on in the moment or not? And then if you're like me and if you're my age and you have parents of a certain age, they always ask these questions. How come so-and-so is always asking me for money? My mother says this to me all the time. They claim if I don't send them money in the next 24 hours, you know, the democracy is doomed. Who are these people? And I'm like, oh, Mom, it's a scam pack. And that's all I usually say. But my guest today, Adam Bonica, political science professor at Stanford, he did the hard work here. And he did this Substack post a couple months ago, showing his receipts of a long dive into the murky waters of digital fundraising. I'm going to read the first couple paragraphs of his Substack so I can sort of set the scene, and then I'm going to bring Adam in to explain his work and explain his findings. He starts out this way. The digital deluge is a familiar annoyance for anyone on a Democratic fundraising list. It's a relentless cacophony of bizarre texts and emails, each one more urgent than the last, promising that your immediate $15 donation is the only thing standing between democracy and the abyss. The main rationale offered for this fundraising frenzy is that it's a necessary evil, that the tactics, while unpleasant, are brutally effective at raising the money needed to win. But an analysis of the official FEC filings tells a very different story. The fundraising model is not a brutally effective tool for the party. It's a financial vortex that consumes the vast majority of every dollar it raises. And Adam, I think this is the number that's going to shock people. For every $100 that people have been sending to these various Democratic entities, and we'll get to the details of them in a minute, for every $100 you sent, $1.60 actually went to the cause. $98.40 went to servicing services rendered, either to the consultants themselves or essentially a vicious loop that just funded one PAC or the other. I am only giving you the top line, Adam. That's how I thought we could try to begin to try to lay the predicate there. What have I missed? What didn't I mention that you feel like people need to understand at the beginning in order to understand this really Byzantine digital fundraising scam?
Yeah. I think I would start by saying most people, not just I talk to, but just in the sort of realm of democratic politics, have had a strong sense, as you mentioned early on, that something here is awry, that the tactics alone, they're a bit bizarre. They are bordering sometimes on, deceptive, maybe even predatory in a lot of ways they're set up. And one of the things that I had been really floored by in the run-up to the 2024 election was just how bombarded I was with these types of messages, not just on email, which was completely overflowing, but also in my text messages.
Because an email, you can at least put it in a spam folder. It's the text messages that become, there is no spam folder for text right now.
And this was the main messaging I was getting from the Democratic Party in the run-up to a crucial election. Mm-hmm. And it just felt wrong to me that this was the way that the brand was being leveraged. As a political scientist, I think of parties, like the most important thing they have is their brand. Mm-hmm. That's what wins you elections, how people view your party. And the way that the brand was being presented to voters and especially to potential donors was really problematic to me. And so that's why I started looking into it. And I've been studying campaign finance for 15 years now. Mm-hmm. It's sort of an area that I have a lot of expertise in. And so I know all the ins and outs of it and sort of how FEC or the Federal Election Commission records mm-hmm. and all these public disclosures work. So I thought maybe I'll just take a look and see if there's anything connecting these types of messages. Because I
And
think
let me
that,
pause you
yeah,
here, because you note this in your Substack. You really thought, that I'm just going to spend a couple of days, and then after a couple of days, I'll be able to unravel this in a couple of days. Well, tell me how long a couple of days took.
well, the first insight took about 5 minutes, which was, oh, all of this is going back to like all these messages that I'm getting that are of this type uh, are coming from basically one firm, Mothership Strategies.
And
All
by the way, I
these
love it.
weird
It's really called Mothership, right? That's the
yes, it's
actual
called
name of the
Mothership
firm.
Strategies.
There was a part of me that thought, is this satire? Is this part of the parody, right? Like, I mean, I guess you could say the founders of this scam had a sense of humor. So Mothership Strategies.
Well, yeah, so it goes even deeper than that, and I'll explain it in a bit. The Mothership Strategy. So this is a firm that is part of a larger sort of digital fundraising industry that exists within both parties, but focusing here on the Democratic side. This firm was started by three former employees who had run the digital fundraising operations for the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee.
The House
the
House campaign arm. Yep.
Yeah, so like the official party committee. And it had spun off and about they had left and sort of privatized a tactic that they had sort of perfected while they were at the DCCC.
And what cycle were they there? This is like 2014, right?
2014.
Right.
They didn't seem to get much traction early on.
Yeah, well, and then a certain orange-haired man came down the stairs, elevator pitch.
Well,
anyway,
it happened actually before that. So they didn't seem to have many clients early on, and their first client was a PAC called End Citizens United. If you get these messages, you may be familiar with it. Turns out that they had started this PAC. The three people had started Mothership to be their first client, and so they started.
So basically,
using
the consultant needed a client, so they invented the client. And let's create a client. So they were immediately on both sides of the transaction. Okay, got it.
And in terms of fundraising, because of the types of tactics that they were using, it happened to be very effective at raising money. And so this caught the attention of a lot of people who were were interested in raising a lot of money for their campaign or their cause. And it just sort of took off from there.
Anything that makes fundraising easier, a consultant or a candidate would love to do. In a weird way, I get why this was attractive at first. Oh my God, you mean I don't have to dial for dollars, or I don't have to like show up to a fundraiser, I don't have to travel to Martha's Vineyard or Napa Valley and suck up to rich people that I really don't have anything in common with. Boy, this would be great if this really works as great as you tell me it works, Mothership.
Yeah, I mean, this is the number one complaint candidates give you all the time is like, I am sick and tired of fundraising all the time. Yeah. And so if someone comes and says, I can raise a ton of money for you through small donors, that's going to be attractive. The problem is once you start seeing the types of messages they're sending and actually who they are getting money from, it becomes a whole different set of questions. That's where the really troubling aspect of this comes from, not just the damage it does to the Democratic Party brand,
right?
But the more and more I dug into this, this is a really, in my sort of like reading of the data, a very predatory approach to fundraising.
To the point where if you wanted to make a criminal, you might be able to look at this through criminal statutes.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think there are any
if it is predatory,
to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, I would use the term predatory not in the like illegal sense, but in the like they are doing everything that I believe from my reading of campaign finance law. I do not see anything that they are doing that is technically illegal.
So this is technically right. So
yeah.
So when could this be under? I mean, could the FTC or could a state attorney general say you're committing borderline fraud / predator? You're using predatory practices to raise money?
Yeah. So there was a CNN like in-depth reporting investigation on these thousands of different complaints that had been sent by largely like children of people who had been sort of
The children of
like
elderly parents, right?
of elderly parents who had
Yes.
given hundreds of thousands of dollars to these
Hmm.
fundraising operations. Many of them were suffering from dementia and other forms of cognitive decline, and they were
Right.
rightfully very upset about what had transpired. And so the complaints are there, but there's not at this moment anything, you know, at the federal level that would suggest that this is outright illegal. Now, should the Democratic Party be engaging or condoning this type of activity? I think that's an entirely different question, and they have
Hmm.
no obligation to say that this is okay. Problem is the ECCC, the DSCC, the official campaign committees are engaging in these same tactics. They
Hmm.
may not be employing Mothership, but they're the way in which their fundraising looks a lot like what we see from these more, you know, unsavory PACs.
Let's go back to Mothership, because you ended up discovering that I don't know what else to call this, but a form of money laundering, because it was moving money around. Money would be in one place, then it would show up in another PAC. Then that PAC would take the money that it received from one PAC and pay it to another PAC. And it all ended up back at Mothership. Explain how that loop worked, because you'd find one entity, and Citizens United would then be working with, and let me get my these other entities. You named quite a few of them, and I do think people want to know which names. You had the Progressive Turnout Project, Stop Republicans, National Democratic Training Committee, a couple of campaigns, John Ossoff's campaign for Senate and Jamie Harrison's campaign for Senate. And it's interesting that, Jamie, when I first read your piece, the first campaign I thought about that I thought got scammed by their own fundraising team was Jamie Harrison's. Because here's a guy, how'd you raise $100 million but not really have $100 million? And now you've explained the story of how that happened. So how did you connect End Citizens United and Progressive Turnout Project, for instance?
So the one of these structures that you see in these PAC filings, so everything needs to be disclosed to
Mm-hmm.
the FEC, and they're usually come in these clusters of PACs. So, for instance, there's this cluster of 7 PACs, including Progressive Turnout Project and Stop Republicans. There's
Mm-hmm.
also Stop Trump. There's a number of pretty high raising PACs in this group. They're all run by the same treasurer. Um,
So it's the
uh,
same individual who signs the forms to the FEC,
yeah,
basically. Okay.
right. And so you can see
Do they
these
share a
sort of
PO box too?
I mean, it's just the same person. So
Yeah.
like he like reports as being these PACs being affiliated too. So it's not some sort of like hidden secret. Now it's
They
like they
admit
can
they're all
transfer money between
connected to
PACs. Yeah.
as far as the FEC is concerned, they're like, oh, okay, these PACs are all affiliated. So it's not
Yes.
unusual.
Often,
So
yeah.
which tells you Mothership isn't alone here, by the way, that this is a
No.
semi-common tactic.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And so what they'll do is so for instance, Stop Republicans, which has raised a lot of money in recent
Mhm.
election cycles, it spent nothing on campaigns or elections. Most of the money that they raised went back to like fundraising fees and consultants. What
Mhm.
didn't was transferred over to Progressive Turnout Project, which seems to be an operations hub. And Progressive Turnout Project does appear to employ people for turnout operations. If like I've done a really deep dive into their campaigns, their spending,
Mhm.
and maybe 15% of what they spend goes towards actual like turnout operation and independent expenditures, but otherwise the vast majority is not. And so you see all these 6 PACs, only one of them is actually spending on campaigns. And the other ones will just raise money and then transfer the money over. But if you're someone who's not wise to what these PACs are, which until I looked into it, I wasn't either, you would think I'm getting, these text messages from 6 different operations, right? They're not
Right.
connected. There's no reason for me to think they are. This is just a normal way for people to fundraise. But really, it's, you could unsubscribe from one, still get messages from the others, and have no idea that they're run by the same person using the same donor list.
Look, if I'm somebody who I've signed up for enough mailers that I get these fundraising emails from both parties and from candidates of both parties. The tactics are very similar on both sides now. They've each this end of the world is coming tactic. I don't know what else to call it, but it's some form of that. Like, and with the right, with MAGA, it's Donald Trump personally is asking. And if he's checking a list. He's looking to see if your name's there, that sort of, but it's very similar in tone, urgency, agitation, and all of this, which is, like you say, it's not illegal, but maybe it should be, but it's certainly predatory. But it's been lucrative.
I mean, it's been lucrative for the consultants.
Right.
The amount of money going back to actual things that they are claiming to support is a very small fraction of the overall total. So in terms of being a great thing for digital fundraising consultants, yeah. The thing about like the point you raised about the both parties having very similar tactics, that's absolutely like an astute observation. Republicans are probably even worse on these types of tactics than Democrats are.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to have more of the money going directly back to Donald Trump. So I don't know.
Oh, it's even right. No. I mean, there is right. In fact, there's some where he demands a piece. If you want to use his list, he's got to get he basically wants a licensing fee, essentially, to use his name, image, and likeness.
Mm-hmm. And I like one of the things I pondered was, at first, I thought what was happening was there was like, these sophisticated algorithms that they were employing, that they were sending out and doing A/B testing. So like some people would get one version, another a group of people would get another version of the message. And they just, over time sort of landed on these types of urgent, ridiculous, like all caps messages that, to most of us just seemed really off-putting, but at scale may have been somewhat effective at fundraising. The more I looked into this, now I don't think that, because the types of tactics that are used looks like they just transferred directly from the tactics that are used in elder financial fraud schemes. So I did a bunch of reading through the FTC and the ways in which they sort of manipulate people emotionally through this urgency. They're like making people think they need to make a decision immediately. These are all known tactics. And it was really quite jarring when I started looking through those and being like, oh, I can just categorize most of these messages into one of these different like elder financial fraud tactics. And that was a pretty depressing moment, to be honest.
Adam, I have a sort of a friend I've become more friendlier with over the years, who was a source of mine at the RNC and quit. I think I have this story right. He essentially quit when he saw a piece of mail that they sent out that got returned. And either the woman called or she wrote in and said, hey, I know you need this money. Tomorrow I don't get my Social Security check for another week. Is it okay if I wait a week? Well, it was like, he was like, I'm out. And I mean, and that dude left politics. He was like, he is out of campaign politics altogether. DR, you name it, was just like sick to his stomach, right? It was just one of those, hit him and he was out. And he's desperate to find any character, left in politics. But it really does prey on older people. And both parties are doing this.
And let me give you a couple stats. So the other aspect of it is it's not like most of this money is coming from people just giving $5 or $10 and then being done with it. And the way they describe the tactics, so Mothership has described it themselves this way, I believe, as burn and churn. So this idea that you're just burning through these donor lists and like, scraping up a little, like a few people, like 1 out of 10,000 who might be donating.
Yeah, they don't even care. They're not even getting a 1% return rate, are they? It's less than a 1%
not
return
even close,
rate.
not even close to that.
Yeah.
But what I learned was that's not what's happening. So here are some examples. So I was looking through the types of people who are giving this money. So the vast majority, so 540 million of the dollars raised since 2020 of these spam packs have come from individuals who have donated at least 10 times. But most of that money is coming from a really small group of what I would say like captivated donors. So for instance, there's an 89-year-old woman in Indianapolis. She's donated to these spam packs 7,500 times.
Oh my God.
And she has given a total of $68,000. There's an 84-year-old retiree in Ohio who's given
Wow.
2,000 times, totaling up $200,000 almost. I have lists of people like this, and you can see where they live. They live in usually sort of middle class or rural areas. They're not
These
wealthy
aren't
people.
wealthy people, and they're just, oh my God. So whatever, I mean, they're just getting nickel and dime the way somebody, the way somebody gets nickel and dime by in-app purchases sometimes when a kid, when you're 5 or 6 year old, and all of a sudden you realize, why am I paying $5 a week to what? And these elderly, and they also end up clicking the make it a recurring payment, right?
Yes.
Isn't that what usually
they don't click it often? So this is sort of like a dark patterns thing. They often automatically put that on.
you have to uncheck it if you don't want it.
Yes,
It's a negative check. Oh God, this is just tragic. Have you I mean, how much? I guess I imagine you almost want to reach out to these people. You've been scammed.
Yeah. So one good development that I've seen happening is ActBlue. I believe they had been working on this beforehand, but immediately after I published that piece, the CEO from ActBlue reached out to me and was like, "Let's talk." And about a week later, they implemented new rules changes so that most of these tactics that I had described would no longer be allowed on the platform.
And was Mothership using ActBlue? Was that their primary facilitator?
Yes, and the problem is they still are, because it's the problem for ActBlue is they're stuck in this like hard place where they want to clean up the fundraising like environment that's or they seem to, and they're like putting rules in place, but the party leadership seems to be using these tactics too. This is something that has been pretty problematic, or at least I think in terms of like, if they want to enforce this stuff, they would have to kick off the DCCC. They would have to kick off the DSCC. I literally just got a message from the DSCC this weekend saying that they were going to 4x match my donation. And that's not a thing. You can't do that.
Yeah, it's illegal. That's actually, if you did that, that is a crime, by the way.
Yes, but it's extremely effective for a certain type of donor who believes that's happening. And, so where does that leave, ActBlue? I think they want a clean house, but it's politically,
Is it politically though? But I mean, like, this is where, my friend Tony Kornheiser likes to say the answer to all your problems is money. And sometimes the answer to all your, the solution to every problem is money, and the diagnosis for every problem sometimes is money, right? How much do they not want to give up? How much is being fun? They make money for anybody that raises money off of their platform.
Well, yeah. So they make some money for this tax.
So Mothership, they in theory have made a lot of money off of Mothership.
Yeah. ActBlue, yes.
Yeah.
They have, and ActBlue's. So they just went under a sort of leadership change. So I think that has something to do with this. I'm hopeful. They've been responsive to me and other people who have worked in this space about trying to eliminate these tactics from the platform. I'm hoping to see more progress in the near future. And so at least that's a good signal that something's being done. Now,
I want you to do the big numbers. Yeah. Tell me how. I couldn't believe the number. The amount of money that Mothership has raised through all of these PACs, and the amount of money that has actually been spent on campaigns as they promised to do.
So we can take the Mothership has raised something like 280, like directly going to the firm as payments. Has been transferred about $280 million. They have.
That's how much they've pocketed. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
My estimate is that this is based off of about $680 million raised.
Okay.
So
where's the other 400 million?
The other 400 million.
So if they've pocketed 282, they've raised about 680. So let's round them up. 280, 680. We're missing about 400 million.
Yes.
Where is that?
So about of that, another 132 million. I believe was spent on other consulting firms, like related in that space.
You
Big
brought up a
chunk of it,
firm called Message Digital LLC.
Message Digital. Yes, yeah.
Did you ever, who pocketed a 22 million? Did you ever figure out who they are? Or are
Yeah,
they just that?
they're another Democratic fundraising sort of operation. You can go
Mhm.
look at their website. They have clients like Chuck Schumer. They're the
Mhm.
ones. What their service that they sell, or like they pitch to campaigns and candidates and consultants, is
Mhm.
that they can get around the mobile carriers spam filters. So like they know how to get around and get those messages to us.
Mhm.
Uh, that seems to be their pitch if you read their website, and you can get a sense of why that would be valuable for a spam fundraising firm like Mothership.
Right. I got you. Okay. So there's that. We got about another 250 million here.
Yeah. So the other, so about 15 million of that goes to like campaign contributions and independent expenditures. Another as far as I can tell, my best estimate is another about 28 million, and I've done like much deeper digging into this more recently, goes to what could be classified as organizational or turnout efforts.
Okay.
And then another chunk of about 10 million goes to refunds to donors who said, I didn't want to donate. Please give me
Right.
back my money. And then the rest just sort of disappears into administrative costs and payroll. And so it's hard to get an exact number of where everything's going, but that from the disbursement data that I have access to,
Yeah.
those are my best estimates.
And again, 17 million total to the campaigns themselves.
It's about, yeah. And most of it's going to the DCCC, around half of the
And
money
that
going
counts
directly to
just
that.
the big
Yeah.
chunk of cash that they just send to the three big committees.
Yeah.
This isn't necessarily to House, that special election House race that they may have been talking about in the fundraising email may not have gotten $1.
Yeah. This is excluding the money they've raised for people like Jamie Harrison. Like I consider that as a different category. So I think they've raised another like 400 million for campaigns, like candidates themselves.
Right.
But I'm looking more at the sort of spam pack, and they no longer have those types of clients, as far as I can tell. That the candidates are no longer hiring Mothership. There are other firms that do the same thing that they're now hiring, or they say peer to be. All the people who had been hired or that had hired Mothership now have shifted over to other related.
Did Mothership try to
digital
explain what they're
firms.
doing? Did they push back?
Yes.
What is their explanation?
They sort of make the argument, and they put out a public statement on Medium. I can't find it anymore. They may have taken it down, but they basically made the argument that, look, this is a necessary evil, that we need to combat the Trump administration, and our tactics are effective. In like they did not they would not respond to like any of my questions in sort of response to their statements about like, what about these why is all your money coming from senior, and why are your tactics look like elder financial fraud? They have not addressed that at all. They basically just fell back on, look, we're fundraising because we need to oppose the Trump administration, and that's just a necessary evil. And then they also sort of trotted out some like candidates who had backed their efforts or like put out statements. So like Sherry Bustos was one of them, and like she came to their defense and said, "Look, I've worked with Mothership, and they're this great organization, and they raise a bunch of money, and so I'm proud of the work that I've done with them." She used to be the chair of the DCCC, right? So you sort of get the sense that this is disconnect to the party in a way that is really troubling.
Well, it's interesting. You're booking. Obviously, you put this out in August. We were able to finally get time for the podcast now here at the end of September, but it's actually good timing because I don't know if you've been paying attention to the debate about the so-called autopsy of the 2024 campaign that the DNC was. And that there's this huge lobbying effort by consultants to basically, they don't want to be shamed for how much money they made off of a bad campaign, essentially. And they're afraid of their name showing up and essentially having happened to them what I believe, look, Mothership earned this. This is what they did. So you're going to get scrutiny. which you came up with. But I think, frankly, seeing what happened with Mothership and realizing there's going to be a lot more people asking questions. And if those firm names get out there, there's going to be deeper dives in trying to figure out, look, James Carville sort of threw it out there without naming names, but he got angry one day in a rant and he said, if you're trying, you can't be worried about the carried interest lobby when you're trying to save democracy. And he was referring to a couple of close Harris consultants who had clients that were worried about carried interest going away, that in the tax code. And you're just like, you know what I mean? Your head goes right in your hand. You're like, you're telling us democracy is on the ballot, but hey, about carried interest,
I think this fundamentally feeds into some of the weaknesses that Democrats have experienced in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, and there's this trend in polling data that is just shouts out at you, which is when people are asked what they're most concerned about, corruption's at the top of the list. YouGov just did a poll about what percentage of people thought that a member of Congress would accept a bribe. It was 71% of people. They're
shocked that somebody might accept a bribe in public service when the former head of the Border Patrol took $50,000 and they didn't even charge him. They didn't deny it happened. Yeah. Well, we don't have enough evidence to charge. But you got your bag of cash. Okay.
They're not wrong. So
right.
The public is very concerned about public corruption. It is, from what I can tell right now in polling data, issue number one. That is a massive opening for the Democratic Party. Anti-corruption has been, probably bar none, the most effective anti-authoritarian strategy globally. We see tons and tons of examples of it.
Adam, it works anytime any party that's out of power, who's trying to get rid of a party, beat back a party that's been in power, say, more than 8 years, there's always a corruption angle that usually succeeds, right? It's one party rule. We all know after about year 8 or 9, somebody's deciding to make money off of this. And you start to see it. It happens. We've experienced it in our lifetimes. We've watched the parties do this. It's effective in our democracy, but you're right. It's times 100 when it comes to stopping authoritarian.
Yeah. And so this is the opening Democrats. It's the type of coalition you build that doesn't have the types of trade-offs where you have to, push people to the left out of the way or tell moderates that they're no longer really important or anything like that. You don't have those types of trade-offs, and it appeals to the working class. So we're on the same page of this. I think too, the problem is you look at the same polling data and people think Democrats are just as corrupt as Republicans. I would personally take issue with that, given the scale of things. But I think people look at what happens in fundraising. They look at the Democratic Party's insistence on the need to raise money from billionaires and mega donors, and they see that effectively as a type of corruption as well. And for Democrats to effectively take on this anti-corruption angle, I think the first thing they need to do is clean house. And that starts with their fundraising practices. This is, beyond the pale, the type of stuff you see from these digital fundraising consultants. But anyone involved in this type of thing should have nothing to do with an anti-corruption party, right? These consultants who are upset about this, this not all consultants on the Democratic side, but the most successful consultants appear to be the ones engaged in this type of behavior, and it looks so bad.
It's interesting. The consultants by name are not the corrupt ones because their name is out there in some ways. They're trading on their own reputations. The most corrupt ones are always the people that do this stuff that's a layer or two below that we all don't see. The digital guy, the phone people, and it's always in this arena where there's only a handful of vendors, and they become the vendor for it is the most corruptible part of the political consulting world. I'm not saying they're all those guys that do phones and do this are corrupt. I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of evidence of corruptibility there in the fundraising side because there's just so much cash in it, and it's moving around all the time. It really is. It's like any cash business. We've all watched Ozark. It kind of works that way. You hate to say it, but it does.
Yeah, and the sad irony of this all. So, as I mentioned, I've been studying campaign finance for a long time. Like I know, spend all my time in this data and how it affects elections. It really matters in a lot of ways for American politics, like who we select to run for office and like primaries. This like mega donor fundraising or the type of fundraising that's coming in from these like more corrupted channels, it's almost like the evidence is it's basically not effective at all. So like money going to a campaign so they can hire staff and put together an operation is useful. Money spent by super PACs appears to have basically no effect on vote shares, like little to no effect. Maybe a tenth of a percentage point if you double your opponent's like super PAC fundraising.
Right.
Just tiny little sliver of the population. But to do that, you're giving up your credibility as a party that can fight corruption. It's just, I don't see the trade-off as being worth it. Consultants get very mad when I say that, but they're the only ones who do.
So, all right, let me get you to answer this sort of pushback about fundraising tactics, which I hear all the time from my friends on the left. Well, we don't want to tie one arm behind our back.
Yeah.
What say you?
Yeah. So first of all, you didn't tie that arm behind your back. You cut it off and give it to consultants. That's sort of where we're at, if we just want to be realistic about it. But secondly, the money you raise there, that's not what wins contemporary elections, is raising more money than your opponent. Having a better party brand is going to win that battle every time.
Donald Trump has been outspent in 2016, in 2020, and in 2024. Discuss. That
is consistent with the empirical evidence that we have, that the campaign advertising has very small effects. There was this really great study that came out recently that has the highest quality standard of like experimental study on campaign ads. They had Facebook like show ads to some people, but randomly have other people not. Then they could track all their political behavior after, like whether they supported like Trump or Biden, because it was in 2020. They found zero effect. Like that's like the highest level would be there's like 30,000 people involved in the study, zero effect on their political behavior. But this is where there's tons of money being spent. And the other thing that I think is really tragic here is that the Democrats have this massive built-in fundraising advantage right now that they are squandering.
What's that advantage?
So the young, like they are out fundraising Republicans. Like right now, Republicans in this last election cycle, half of their money came from 100 donors, 100 mega donors.
Got it. Okay.
56% of their money came from people giving over $1 million.
That's like the Adelsons and Elon Musk and that crowd. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
For Democrats, it's about 18%. If you cut that 18% off, they still would have out fundraised Republicans. But
so they have more upper middle, basically they have more upper middle class donors than the Republicans.
Silicon Valley, like
used to be the other way around. This is the law. This goes to the whole loss of the suburban vote, which once leaned Republican, and therefore they had a lot of the $5,000 donors. Now it's the Democrats that have the $5,000 donors.
Yeah. It's good. This advantage is just going to continue to grow if they don't squander it. With 80% of people under 40 who are donating to federal elections are giving to Democrats, exclusively to Democrats. They have won this entire sort of young professional class that will be the sort of
but if money is speech in the future. Money is speech. How are you going to? I mean, this gets.
Yeah.
I've come around on campaign finance. I always like to use the example, and I don't know if you've ever heard me use it, and so my apologies if you have, but the metaphor I would use was always the Jeffrey Goldblum character in Jurassic Park. This is my issue with campaign finance laws, because every time you try one, it almost seems to create new loopholes. And so Jeffrey Goldblum said when the old man in Jurassic Park said, "Hey, they're not going to breed," and Goldblum says, "Life finds a way." Well, that's always been my attitude about money and politics. No matter what you do, money finds a way. Oh, you're not going to let them do soft money to the parties? Well, we're going to create 501c3s, and then we're going to do the then, oh, you're not going to let this, we're going to do the super PAC. And then we're going to, there was always a new tax gimmick using the tax code to find another way. Well, this money will only be able to be spent on political organizing, but it's softer over here. And then we have our $100 over. And the point was, money always found a way. But we are getting to the point of absurdity, right? Where every candidate now has to have their own billionaire. And if you don't have a sugar billionaire, a sugar mommy or sugar daddy, you can't run for statewide office in America. And that's when you realize, we have a kleptocracy.
Yes. I think that's an excellent analogy that fits my reading of the history of campaign finance regulation, that you do see this pressure. The Supreme Court's mostly culpable in the recent version of this, but was that what you'd like to see? I had this, there's this movement to try to reinterpret Citizens United and reinterpret the campaign finance law using Maine's, a referendum that was passed in Maine. We'll see what happens there. Yeah. Ideally in the long run, yes. I don't see that as a viable strategy in the near run. And so, as a pragmatist, I don't see that as something the Democratic Party, like if they say we want a constitutional amendment to ban Citizens United, fine. Like 80% of the population supports that. So you're not going out on a limb there. But I think where the real advantage that they could gain right now is this is more of they actually don't need this money. If they went back to saying we're only going to let people give us up to the $130,000 limit that was in place before for Citizens United, and the rest of that money you can go spend on pro-democracy stuff, but you can't give it to us because we don't want that appearance of corruption. If the Democratic Party did that, they would have more than enough money to fund their operations, and they would, as a party, gain a huge credibility advantage against Republicans because they could say, we're not the corrupt ones. Look what we did. I don't see that as a realistic thing that the Democratic Party will do. But my God, I think it's something that they would absolutely be advantaged from doing, because that money, the amount they can raise from traditional fundraising sources, will more than make up for what they lose from these mega donors. I
think we're in a moment. I would have been more skeptical of that a couple years ago, because it does, my issue is I can't find an example of somebody losing over campaign finance issues, right? It's one of those issues that when you ask a voter about it, they're like, yeah, I don't like the system. But when you ask them, what don't you like in general, it's like fifth or sixth on the list, right? And that's, and it's like, it is a prodding issue. It's an issue if you tell the voter about, you educate them about, they're going to be they're probably going to be willing to come your way. But it is one of those, you're trying to get them to agree with you on a problem. And in politics, the party that is able to agree with the voter on what the voter thinks are the problems usually has the advantage. And so that's where I've been a skeptic on this. I say all that. This big, mega rich tech community that is trying to buy up land all over the country, take up the power grid, decide what you and I get to see. We're going to have 4 families controlling all of media, right? That, the consolidation, the robber baron type mindset, that I think, the consolidation of wealth, connecting it to the campaign finance issue, that I buy.
Yeah, it's a risk, but it's one that I think is well justified given the moment. The anti-oligarchy angle is really important to consider now. One of my colleagues, Walter Snydell, has this paper from a few years back showing that economic inequality in the U.S. is higher than it was at the end of the Roman Republic or right before the French Revolution, right? Like we're in pretty extreme territories, and it's getting worse and worse and worse in terms of what we're seeing. These are the types of things that are very, destabilizing to democracies, and we've known that for a long time.
Well, the greatest trick the billionaires ever pulled was convincing the working class that they were on their side.
Yeah, but even and like there's this Ken Martin, the chair of the DNC, like
Mm-hmm.
said a few months back, like, look, there are good billionaires and bad billionaires, and we're going to continue
Mm.
raising money from the good billionaires. I don't actually disagree with the claim that there are good billionaires out there, but it just comes off as so self-serving and
And
so
remember,
like,
who he thinks is a good billionaire, half the country might think they're not that good, or they're the son or daughter of somebody that made money the wrong way. Like, it isn't going to be as clean as you think it is, Ken Martin.
yeah. And also we just have to go back to the 2024 election. And if you remember Mark Cuban, who was stumping for Kamala Harris, and at one point the Harris campaign had come out pretty forcefully with we're going to tax unrealized gains on fortunes over $100 million. So affecting a tiny, tiny slice of the population. Right. Very few people have that type of money. And it was a pretty populist measure. It had come out of the Biden campaign, and it was probably the strongest economic populist message that they had. Mark Cuban went off script, said it would destroy the economy, and at one of the stump speeches, and said that if Harris had been elected and gone through with it, he would campaign against her next time. Right? This is back to James Carville's point that if you're really chasing this money, their interests are just not aligned with what a party like the Democrats probably need to do to regain power, which is not to cater to those who already have power, but to cater to a working class that sees things as completely rigged against them.
You know, in our closing few minutes here, because we've gone almost 45 on this topic, proof that you can go long on campaign finance issues. What you've been studying this for a long time. You've said were there other forks in the road that if we'd not taken them, we'd be in a better spot, at least on the campaign finance? I look at McCain-Feingold and think it was the unintended consequences made it bad legislation, even though it was attempting to do good. What say you?
Yeah. So I tend to agree that it didn't achieve all its goals. Part of that it was sort of kneecapped by what the Supreme Court did in response.
Sure,
to
but we did get it for about 10 years, and it I would argue it gutted the parties in a way that I don't think we all saw coming, and it moved the money outside of the parties harder for people like you and I to track. That's my concern.
This is also something many political scientists say, that the weakening of the parties as a result of McCain-Feingold was a negative consequence that was not expected. And I tend to agree with that stronger parties tend to be a little more, I don't know, protective of their brands. And I think we've saw that sort of fall off. The other thing I just want to bring up is, campaign finance we think of it as this like a US thing, but the US is very exceptional in how we operate campaign fundraising compared to other democracies. It's just not the same thing in Europe or even Japan, even in South Korea, where it's a big problem. They have much stricter regulations on it that make it look nothing like the US. And so I guess my general point is, yes, there were it's hard to see where the missteps were. It's just sort of bad starting point that institutionally was always going to be very difficult to fix, even for well-meaning reformers, because of the hurdles there. But the truth is, the way that we have approached campaign finance, this notion that money is speech, that has nothing to do with how democracy operates worldwide. And I think having that perspective for moving forward should be helpful for, when we do have a moment to engage in actual institutional reform, which seems like it probably will be coming around the corner, because it's hard to see. Our institutions are so unstable right now.
So in the 2000 election, both presidential nominees took the federal matching funds, which meant they each agreed to only spend about $65 million total in their general election campaign. 12 years later, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney each spent $1 billion. It's one of the fast. So if we hit the $1 billion per campaign mark in 2012, we just hit the $2 billion. I mean, we're going to have I assume the 2028, 2032, we're looking at a $5 billion per party presidential election?
Oh, we exceeded that in 2020. The amount raised at the federal level in 2020 exceeded for both presidents and
Yeah.
congressional exceeded 20 billion.
No, right.
So
I
it
knew
had,
that, but I'm just
yeah,
talking about just for
yeah.
the presidency, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's very viable. And then you have to think, so what is like advertising cannot be the most efficient way to spend that at this point. The 30th ad you see in
Well, the
Pennsylvania
joke
cannot
is
be that effective.
just write a check to the voter that you need. I mean, at this point, right, where you're fighting over the last 40,000 swing voters in Michigan, buy them a new fishing boat. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I'm being facetious, but there's an inefficiency about this, right? Where we have fewer swing voters than ever and more money per swing voter to spend.
Yeah. I mean, the alternative is more of it spent on mobilization. So that's where we see variation in elections is these turnout differentials. If Democrats are like more motivated and they turn out at high rates than Republicans, that swamps any sort of who's winning the swing voters in recent elections. It's not an easy thing to do. So it's not clear that spending money on that type of mobilization will yield the types of returns. But I don't know. I look at the New York City election, which is not representative of the country, but the like youth turnout that Mamdani saw was just off the charts. I'd never seen anything like it in terms of like young people were turning out at nearly the same rates as old people in in a U.S. election. It's just not something you see. And so and his strategy of using money is like he raised up to the limit and said, "Stop sending me money. I don't need it anymore, but I need volunteers." And so maybe there's a different model that is less reliant on what you can spend money to do and more reliant on traditional mobilizing and saying like, I don't need your money, I need your help. And
all right, but let me get at a pet peeve of mine that's in the state you teach it. The California referendum process feels like a system that only gives political consultants a reason to live in the state of California. That the amount of money that two entities spend against each other. I mean, the fight over mobile sports gambling is probably the best example where you had each side was, there was no good side. It was, we want to be the monopoly. No, we want to be the monopoly. And we're going to make you, the voter, decide which side is least evil to be your monopoly in sports gambling. You're also going to see probably $500 million just on this redistricting initiative.
Yeah. It is, so in some ways it's more democratic because it is broken away from sort of the type of gridlock you can see in legislative institutions.
No, I mean, it's the one thing I say that you can defend, that I'll defend, at least they're going to the voters with this disenfranchising idea, but at least they're asking for the voters to approve disenfranchisement. But anyway, go ahead.
But if I could, but I completely share your gripe with the way that it often operates. Often it's just two special interests trying to get the upper hand. I wish there was more editing of that process.
Yeah.
And that we had institutions set up so that just wasn't, we actually asked questions that were of relevance to the public. I was voting on a ballot measure about like kidney dialysis like regulations that I have no clue about.
Did you wonder why the hell is this even on the ballot for lay people to decide dialysis regulation, right?
Well, I knew why, because they didn't get what they wanted out of the legislature. So they went to a consultant, they figured out how to get it on the ballot. So yes, I mean, I think there's a lot of graft that goes on in that process. It's not necessary. So again, as someone who's more of a reformer, I would absolutely put much more limitations on the types of things that should appear on ballots.
Well, Adam, your analysis and investigation, and what's your Substack is called On Data and Democracy, is that right?
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. Go check it out. It's methodical in all the right ways, and this is independent journalism at its best, because you're not. I will tell you, I tried to do an audit. I was obsessed after 2012. I tried to get NBC and partner with another news organization, because we always worry about where money comes from, but we never actually do what you did, which where does this money go? And I thought $1 billion. Look, I know some of it's going to the TV stations, but not all of it, right? Who's making, besides, Verizon cell phones and AT&T cell phones, who's making so much money off of the industry that is politics? But, it's a tough thing to get people excited about. And yet it's, it's arguably what's weakening the democracy more than anything else we're dealing with.
Well, thank you. And I agree. And thanks for having me on. I think it's been a great conversation. You really need to get it. So
when people take your class, what are they at Stanford? I'm just curious, what are your specific areas of political science that you teach?
So I teach Intro to American Politics.
The big anybody that all the athletes, everybody gets into that class, right?
Yeah, we title In Defense of Democracy. So I teach that with my colleague Hakeem Jefferson.
Okay.
I teach American political institutions, and I teach machine learning and politics. So institution and data type person. Yeah.
And at a place like Stanford, that's actually that's probably next level, potentially the opportunity to be next level stuff and understanding that area. Because I do think a lot of politicians get taken by people coming in from the tech world saying, oh, I can do all of this. And they sort of like the way a mechanic can con somebody who doesn't know anything about cars. Oh, you need a new Johnson rod, that you see sometimes the tech community. So it's good to see political people getting a little bit of tech education, because I do think sometimes those people take advantage of the lack of knowledge that, say, a Chuck Schumer and his chief of staff have for this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I do, and that is sort of one of the public services I'm trying to provide is, bring data and empirical evidence in ways that are more accessible, so that people who are not just decision makers, but the public can sort of see through some of the things that they sort of feel are wrong, but don't really have the evidence to point to.
Well, if the DNC is trying to turn the page and rebrand, embracing an investigation like this would probably be a step in the right direction. I just don't know if I don't know if the current leaders that the party has right now are ready for that kind of reform. I don't see evidence of it. Do you?
No, I'm quite so. Part of my analysis is I've looked at the leadership, and they tend to be, so Hakeem Jeffries, about 80% of his small donors. So he's raised $3 million from small donors this election cycle. 80% of those donors have also given to these spam packs. He uses many of the same tactics. And you can look at his Facebook ads and see who he's targeting, and his consultants are targeting people who are 65 plus almost exclusively. And so I don't see that being a likely scenario, but I tell people this is the year of the snake. It's the year where it's get like in Chinese horoscope, it's the year that the skin sheds and there's renewal, and the Democratic Party looks like it's going under a renewal. And I think there's a lot of energy in sort of reform. So
who knew that the year of the snake would bring about renewal rather than something more nefarious? I like that. The year of the snake. We're shedding our skin. We're shedding our brand. Anyway, Adam, this was terrific. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.